Hello everybody, today we are going over the first part of our biology lecture about cells, specifically organelles inside human cells. So, cells. What are cells? It's pretty obvious, but cells are the smallest unit of life. And cells kind of handle every function inside our body. You know, skin, they're made out of skin cells. Muscle, they're made out of muscle tissue, but tissue are also made of cells. So they are very important in most organisms. And interestingly, a single cell is also an organism. So you can see that we're made of organisms. That kind of terrifies me. But single cell organisms are pretty less complex than us because we are more complex and therefore we contain more cells than them. So cells can be divided into two types, eukaryotic and prokaryotic. Eukaryotic cells are plants, animals, fungi, protozoan cells, and these cells have nucleus that contain DNA and other organelles are inside the cells. Prokaryotic cells are cells of bacteria and their DNA is kind of spread out in these cells, which is pretty interesting. So, as I introduced in my introduction video, we are not really going to explore other types of cells, but mostly on human cells. So, first of all, let's get to the two organelles we're going to talk about in today's video, the nucleus and the mitochondria. Then let's talk about the organelles first in general. So as you know, that there are multiple organelles and they can't really be counted because they're kind of organs of the cell and they can't really be defined because there are a lot of them, and that's like the biggest reason why. And we are going to talk about the main organelles that are probably the most important in human cells. So let's take a look at the nucleus first. So the nucleus, what it does is it stores genetic material, for example, the DNA, and its most important function is storing those data inside the cell that the cell can use to replicate itself through mitosis. And it's like a control center because it controls main activities like gene expression, DNA replication, like I mentioned earlier, processing RNA, and transport between the nucleus and cytoplasm. The nucleus is made out of, so it has two layers, nuclear envelope, and then it has nuclear pore complexes, nucleolus, nucleolamina, nucleoplasm, and chromatin, which is very interesting. So, as I mentioned earlier, the nucleus is extremely important because it holds important information that can be used for cell division. Because, for example, let's say we didn't have a nucleus inside our cells, we would probably be dead because, well, without DNA, they can't really replicate themselves, nor they can exist. Well, that's a terrifying thing to think about. And let's go over the mitochondria. The mitochondria is called a mitochondrion in singular form, and it creates energy, basically. You know, if you're kind of used to the biology field, or just if you have learned anything in general, you've probably heard of this phrase, mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell. It's very common. Everybody knows that. So let's talk about how they can do that. So first of all, the mitochondria's functions are ATP production, calcium storage, programmed cell death, heat production, metabolic functions, and signaling. But the most important thing that we'll talk about is ATP production, because ATP is energy. It's adenosine triphosphate, and this ATP it carries energy. And it's very easy to recycle, so it's used commonly by cells or any other thing to get energy from. So mitochondria, they're very important in producing ATP through the electron transport chain. And they also do metabolic functions, like I mentioned. The citric acid cycle, or the Krebs cycle, is a very good example of this. So the Krebs cycle is kind of like generating energy, more like getting energy, producing energy from, you get carbon, and by using the carbon, let's say we eat food, and then we get carbon out of it, then the Krebs cycle, it breaks down those carbon to get CO2 and ATP. You do get other things as a result of this, but the most important thing is that you can get energy through the Krebs cycle. Wow, that's very interesting. So the mitochondria is made out of many parts. So it has an inner membrane and an outer membrane, and it has mitochondrial DNA. And there's also space in between the inner membrane and the outer membrane, which is called intermembrane space. And they have ribosomes inside as well. It's very good to know. Also, mitochondria, the mitochondrial ribosomes are really small. They're very tiny compared to cytoplasmic ribosomes. Also, the mitochondria always move around the cell and change shape and size. This is because this behavior is needed to respond to the cell's needs dynamically, and is very important for the life cycle of the mitochondria. Also, in some cells, like for example the sperm cells, mitochondria are around, like concentrated in certain spaces of the cell. And for example, in sperm cells, the mitochondria, they're around the flagellum to provide energy needed for the sperm cell to move. Because, when you look at the sperm cell, it kind of wiggles around, So that's why the mitochondria are around, stuck there. Also, the mitochondria, they're around places that need high amounts of energy, Like for muscle cells, they're near the contractile apparatus to supply energy quickly to let the muscles contract. So we have talked about the nucleus and the mitochondria, and I think this will be it. So in the next part, we are going to talk about the cell membrane and the ribosome. So if you want to take a listen to the next one, maybe come back in 2 weeks. And also I'll be uploading the worksheet for this part as well. So if you want to dig deeper into this, it would be good if you could work on the worksheet as well by yourself. And yep, that's it. Have a good day, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.